Hi, everyone. I've made a study guide for you, and I'm going to talk my way through it and add if I think anything needs to be added. Okay, so I'm just going to go one at a time. What does IP stand for? Internet Protocol. What is an IP address? A numerical address assigned to each device that uses the internet. And a device can be a computer, a cell phone, an iPad, anything with internet access. Explain IPv4 and IPv6. IPv4 and IPv6 are Internet protocols versions 4 and 6. IPv4 is the original addressing system that uses 32-bit addresses. But there's been such an explosion of devices connected to the Internet that there's become an urgent need to go to a higher version of Internet protocol. So IPv6 is intended to use 128-bit addresses, which is a significant change from IPv4. What is a router? A router is a type of computer that transmits packets of data between two computers on the internet. It is a computer which receives messages traveling across the network and redirects them towards their intended destination based on the addressing information included with the message. Remember when we worked on the router uh, internet simulator? That one of the things we said is that we try to balance the workload across a given system of routers. How many routers will a message traverse as it travels from one computer to another on the internet? That will depend on many factors, such as the distance between the two computers, the amount of network traffic, if there are any failed transmission lines, etc. Remember in one of the videos we watched, it showed kind of like a spider web of different paths that can be taken by information across the internet. And it was designed that way in case of a nuclear attack wiped out part of the network, that there would be other paths for information to continue to travel. What is DNS? DNS is the domain name system. This is a system for assigning domain names on the internet to IP addresses. It is the protocol used to locate an IP address based on the domain name entered into a browser. Also think back to that video, that part that I think is so funny when the user types in www.code.org and then that goes to the DNS. The DNS tries to look up the IP address for that domain name. When it doesn't find it, it asks its other DNS friends if they have that information, IP address for that domain name. And the one DNS with the low voice had the IP address, gave it to the original DNS, and he said, "Oh, I'll make a note of that," and then sent the IP address to the original computer where www.code.org was originally typed. What is a DNS server? What does it do? A computer that is part of the DNS and replies to computers that request the IP address of a given domain. Is DNS at a higher, lower, or the same level of abstraction when compared to the TCP? It is at a higher level. Study the graphic of the layers of abstraction on the internet. And so that I am referring to this diagram here. And we'll get back to that later. What is the IETF and who are its members? The IETF stands for Internet Engineering Task Force. It is a decentralized organization made up of citizens and engineers. This group develops and promotes voluntary internet standards and protocols, in particular, the standards that comprise the Internet Protocol Suite, TCP/IP. What is TCP/IP? What practical purpose does it serve on the internet? Transmission Control Protocol / Internet Protocol is what TCP/IP stands for. Usually when discussing TCP, it is grouped with IP. TCP/IP, it is the protocol that distributes packets between IP addresses. The TCP governs how online messages are broken down into 8-bit packets, which are delivered along with addressing and routing information. What is a packet? Why are packets necessary? A packet is a small chunk of information that is the result of a larger online message being broken down. Doing so makes online communication faster and more reliable. What are some of the different top-level domains that are administered by the DNS? That would be .coms, .orgs, .edus, and .nets. And remember from the one video, it showed that is how DNSs are organized into groups based on these different top-level domains. What is a subdomain? Give an example. A domain that is part of another domain. So we would say enwikipedia.org is a subdomain of wikipedia.org, which itself is a subdomain of .org. Explain the concept of abstraction as it relates to layers/protocols on the internet. The higher a protocol is in the hierarchy of layers of the internet, see the image, and it's actually below, not above. The higher the level of the protocol, the greater the abstraction. A high-level protocol, such as HTTP, relies upon the functionality of the lower-level protocols, such as TCP, without having to concern itself with the details of how those layers work. Abstraction reduces the information in detail to focus on the essential characteristics of a given layer. How do HTTP messages work? What gets sent back and forth? HTTP messages are ASCII-based and are used when a client computer requests content from a web server. It is the protocol used to assemble the contents of websites in a browser. A request is sent to the server, and the server either responds with the requested content, often in HTML code, or a message explaining why the request failed. What do routers do? How does a router determine where to send information? A router is a computer designed to receive and redirect packets of information based upon the addressing information via the IP address contained in the packet. Routers will either deliver a packet to its final destination or forward it to one of several other routers it is connected to. By monitoring current network conditions, a router can determine which of these will allow the packet to reach its destination fastest. There will often be redundant paths between two locations on the internet, and so if one path is experiencing traffic or otherwise out of service, additional paths will be available. This redundancy makes the internet more reliable and also helps the internet to scale, accommodating new users and routers as they are connected to the system. If I have a file like an image and it is broken down into packets, those packets are sent across, and each packet could potentially take a different path to its final destination. It is valid to say the HTTP protocol does not work without a layer to convert domain names into IP addresses. Why or why not? Yes, it is valid to say this. If there is no DNS layer, the HTTP must implement all the DNS details because the HTTP relies heavily on domain names. What happens when you attempt to access a resource over the internet? When you access a resource over the internet, the request is broken into packets by the TCP. The information is sent over wires to a DNS server that finds the IP address of the server that you are requesting information. The DNS then routes the packets to the server where the information is gathered, broken into packets, and sent back to the client over wires. The TCP checks the packets, and HTTP tells the browser how to coordinate the information received from the server. Therefore, we say that the TCP is a low-level protocol. We don't have to interact with it. The high-level protocols like HTTP and DNS rely on it, but don't need to know anything about how it works. And that is an abstraction.